The massive shadow fell across Earth's moon like a dark curtain being drawn. Captain Jiho pressed his face against the cold metal of the observation deck, watching ships that looked like they were carved from black glass emerge from empty space. Each alien vessel was 3 times larger than humanity's biggest space station, and there were dozens of them. "Sir, we're getting readings we've never seen before," Lieutenant Mina called from her station, her voice shaking. The communication arrays were going crazy, picking up energy signatures that made their most advanced technology look like stone tools. Jiho had been commanding the lunar defense platform for 8 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Down on Earth, people were just waking up to another ordinary Tuesday. Coffee shops were opening in Seoul, children were getting ready for school in New York, and farmers in rural areas were starting their morning chores. None of them knew that everything was about to change forever. The alien fleet moved with deadly grace, positioning themselves in perfect formation around Earth's orbital space. Their ships didn't make any sound, didn't leave any exhaust trails, and seemed to bend light around their edges in ways that hurt to look at. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the small blue planet through sensors that could count individual humans from space. "Pathetic," he muttered in his own language, which sounded like metal scraping against stone. The Kithran Empire had conquered 47 worlds, and each one had been easier than the last. These humans still used chemical rockets to barely escape their own gravity well. Their weapons threw pieces of metal at each other. They hadn't even figured out faster-than-light travel yet. The conquest protocol was simple and had worked perfectly for centuries. First, demonstrate overwhelming power. Second, demand surrender. Third, begin resource extraction while the natives cowered in fear. Most species gave up after seeing just one Kithran warship. The smart ones surrendered immediately and were allowed to live as workers. The stubborn ones usually changed their minds after watching their largest cities get vaporized from orbit. Colonel Do Yun was running diagnostics on the missile defense grid when the first alien probe ship detached from the main fleet. It was smaller than the others but still dwarfed the International Space Station. The probe moved slowly toward Earth, scanning everything with beams of purple light that made the air itself shimmer. "This is it," Do-hyun whispered to his crew. "Whatever happens next, we make them remember that humans don't kneel." His missile battery had exactly 12 nuclear warheads, designed to stop asteroids from hitting Earth. They were humanity's most powerful weapons, and against these aliens, they probably wouldn't even scratch the paint. The probe ship reached Earth's upper atmosphere and began broadcasting on every frequency humanity used for communication. The message was simple and came through in perfect English, Mandarin, Spanish, and dozens of other languages all at once. The translation technology alone was more advanced than anything humans had ever dreamed of. "Inhabitants of the third planet," the voice was cold and mechanical, "you are now subjects of the Kithran Empire. Your world has been selected for resource extraction. Surrender immediately and your deaths will be swift. Resist and we will make your suffering last for generations. You have 1 rotation of your planet to comply." The message repeated in every human language, broadcasted from every radio station, television channel, and internet connection on Earth simultaneously. The aliens had taken control of humanity's entire communication network in seconds, just to deliver their ultimatum. World leaders held emergency meetings. Military commanders scrambled to assess their options. Scientists ran calculations that all led to the same conclusion. Humanity didn't stand a chance. The alien ships used technology that was thousands of years ahead of anything on Earth. This wasn't a war, it was extermination waiting to happen. But something strange happened in those first few hours. Instead of panic, instead of immediate surrender, something else began to spread across the planet. In military bases, soldiers loaded their weapons and checked their equipment. In cities, people looked up at the sky with anger instead of fear. In laboratories, scientists began frantically studying the alien broadcasts, looking for any weakness they could find. Lieutenant Mina received the response from Earth's Unified Command just as the 24-hour deadline approached. Every nation on Earth had voted. Every military leader had agreed. Every scientist, every soldier, every person who had been asked the same question had given the same answer. She opened, the communication channel to the alien fleet, her hands steady despite everything. The message she sent was brief, transmitted on the same frequency the aliens had used for their ultimatum. It went out in every human language, just like theirs had, but it was much shorter. No, Admiral Vextar couldn't believe what his translation systems were telling him. In 47 conquered worlds, no species had ever given such a simple, defiant response. There were no negotiations, no pleas for mercy, no attempts to buy time. Just a single word that meant these primitive creatures were choosing to fight against impossible odds. The first Kithran probe ship descended toward Sol, expecting the usual display of terror and desperation. Instead, it met 12 nuclear missiles launched simultaneously from Colonel Doyun's platform. The alien shields absorbed most of the damage, but the unexpected ferocity of the attack caused visible damage to their hull plating. As the probe ship's shields flickered and its perfect black surface showed scorch marks for the first time, Admiral Vextar realized they had made a fundamental miscalculation. These humans weren't just refusing to surrender, they were declaring war against an empire that spanned half the galaxy. And somehow, impossibly, they had drawn first blood. The Kithran response came faster than anyone expected. Admiral Vextar had been embarrassed by the nuclear strike on his probe ship, and embarrassment wasn't something the Kithran Empire tolerated. Within hours, 5 massive warships broke formation and headed straight for Earth, their weapons charging with energy that made the space around them glow like miniature suns. Commander Nari watched the approaching ships from her orbital defense station, knowing she was about to lead humanity's first real space battle. Her squadron consisted of 12 fighters that had been designed to intercept debris and asteroids, not alien warships. The pilots under her command were brave, but they were also terrified. Everyone knew this was probably a suicide mission. "Listen, up," Nari said over the communication channel to her pilots. "We're not trying to win this fight, we're trying to show them that humans don't go quietly. Every shot you take, every second you keep their attention, that's another moment for the people down on Earth to prepare." The lead Kithran ship was the size of a city block, bristling with weapons that could vaporize mountains. Its name translated to something like inevitable conclusion in human language, which told you everything you needed to know about Kithran confidence. The ship's captain had orders to demonstrate overwhelming power by destroying a major population center, then demand surrender again. Sol was the target. 8 million people living their lives, completely unaware that death was approaching. From space at incredible speed, the city's air defense systems were designed to stop missiles and aircraft, not alien plasma cannons that could melt steel from orbit. Captain Taiho was leading the second wave of human fighters when the Kithran ships opened fire on the orbital defense platforms. The energy beams were so bright they could be seen from Earth's surface, cutting through space like swords made of pure light. Where they hit human structures, metal simply ceased to exist. "They're not just trying to destroy us," Taiho realized, watching the methodical way the aliens targeted each defense platform. "They're making a point. They want the people on Earth to see this." The first human fighter to die was piloted by a young woman named Sujin. She'd been a commercial pilot before volunteering for the Defense Force, flying passenger jets between cities. Her fighter lasted exactly 43 seconds against the alien weapons before being vaporized completely. But in those 43 seconds, she managed to fire every missile she had at the enemy ship's shields. The missiles didn't penetrate the shields, but they created bright explosions that lit up the darkness of space. For the first time in the battle, the aliens had to actually pay attention to what the humans were doing. It wasn't much, but it was something. Nari's fighter was faster and more maneuverable than the others because it had been modified with experimental engines. She used this advantage to dart between the alien ships, firing constantly and trying to find weak points in their defenses. Her weapons barely scratched their hull plating, but she kept shooting anyway. "Commander, this isn't working," one of her pilots called over the radio. "Our weapons can't hurt them." "Then we use the ships themselves," Nari replied, making a decision. That would change everything. She turned her fighter toward the nearest Kithran vessel and pushed her engines to maximum power. "All pilots, if your weapons run out, ram them. Make every shot count and make every ship count. The Kithran captain couldn't believe what he was seeing. These primitive humans were deliberately crashing their vessels into his ships. It was tactically insane, strategically worthless, and completely unprecedented in his experience. No civilized species fought like this. No rational beings threw away their lives for such minimal damage, but the humans kept coming. When pilot Dongyun's weapons failed, he aimed his fighter at the alien ship's communication array and hit it at full speed. The explosion barely dented the alien hull, but it knocked out their ability to coordinate with the rest of the fleet for several minutes. When Lieutenant Youngmi's engines were damaged by enemy fire, she used her remaining momentum to crash into what looked like a weapons port. The impact created a small breach in the alien ship's armor, the first real damage they had suffered in the battle. Captain Taiho watched his squadron disappear one by one, each pilot making the same choice to use their ship as a final weapon. His own fighter was badly damaged, systems failing, but he had one advantage. His ship was bigger than the others, a modified cargo hauler that had been converted into a makeshift gunship. "This is for Earth," he said simply, turning toward the largest Kithran ship. The inevitable conclusion was still charging its main weapon to fire on Seoul, its massive energy cannon glowing brighter and brighter. Taiho aimed his dying ship at that cannon and pushed his engines beyond their safety limits. The collision happened in complete silence, the way everything does in space. Taiho's ship, small and primitive compared to the alien vessel, struck the energy cannon just as it was about to fire. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface, a brief new star that flared and died in the darkness above. The Kithran ship didn't explode. It was too well built for that. But its main weapon was destroyed, and the explosion had damaged several other systems. For the first time in the history of the Kithran Empire, a primitive species had actually hurt one of their warships in combat. Admiral Vextar stared at the damage reports in disbelief. The humans had lost every single fighter in the battle. They had inflicted minimal actual damage on his fleet. By any reasonable measure, this had been a complete victory for the Kithran Empire. So, why did it feel like a defeat? The answer came when he reviewed the battle recordings. Every human pilot had fought until their ship was destroyed. Not one had tried to retreat or surrender. They had used their own vessels as weapons, something no other species had ever done. They had turned a hopeless battle into something that looked almost like courage. More disturbing was the effect on his own crew. Kithran warriors were trained to expect surrender after demonstrations of power. They were prepared to fight enemies who used tactics and strategy. They weren't prepared to fight opponents who treated their own deaths as acceptable weapons. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving another transmission from the planet." "Another surrender offer?" Vextar asked hopefully. "No, sir, it's the same word as before. No. But this time it's coming from 12,000 different locations, simultaneously." Vextar looked down at the blue planet where millions of humans were apparently preparing to fight the same way their pilots had, with absolute refusal to give up, regardless of the cost. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something he had never experienced before when facing a primitive species. He felt worried. Admiral Vextar made the call that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He contacted the Kithran High Command and requested the entire 3rd Sector fleet. 47 additional warships, carrying enough firepower to crack a planet's crust, began their journey toward Earth. What was supposed to be a simple 3-day conquest had become the Empire's largest military operation in decades. The humans somehow detected the incoming reinforcements while they were still days away. Instead of surrendering or fleeing, they did something that defied all logic. They turned their entire world into a fortress. Engineer Suho had been designing shopping malls and office buildings just a week ago. Now he was converting those same structures into weapon manufacturing plants. The shopping mall in downtown Busan became a missile factory. The car assembly plant in Detroit started producing armor plating. Even the toy factories were retooled to make components for military equipment. "We need more steel," Suho told his exhausted team as they worked around the clock. "Strip everything. Park benches, playground equipment, decorative sculptures. If it's metal and we're not using it to fight, melt it down." The transformation was happening everywhere at once. Dr. Yuna, who had spent her career studying plant biology, found herself designing orbital defense platforms using the same principles that helped flowers track the sun. The space stations that had been used for scientific research were stripped down and rebuilt as weapon platforms, bristling with every type of gun humanity could manufacture. The most ambitious project was happening in the asteroid belt. Admiral Kyung, a former mining engineer who had been given command of the outer system defenses, was turning chunks of rock into the deadliest minefield in human history. His teams worked in spacesuits, attaching nuclear warheads to asteroids and setting them on collision courses with predetermined coordinates. The aliens think in straight lines, Kyung explained to his crews over the radio. Their ships are fast, but they follow predictable paths. We're going to fill those paths with surprises. Every asteroid became a potential weapon. Some were loaded with explosives. Others were equipped with simple chemical rockets that could change their course at the last second. A few were hollowed out and filled with thousands of small metal fragments that would spread out like shotgun pellets when detonated. The Kithran fleet arrived to find Earth surrounded by a cloud of floating death. Admiral Vextar had expected to find a defeated world ready to surrender. Instead, his sensors detected thousands of potential threats scattered throughout the solar system. The humans had weaponized everything from space junk to ice chunks from the outer planets. "This is unprecedented," his tactical officer reported. "We're detecting active weapon signatures from over 15,000 separate objects. They've turned their entire star system into a battlefield." The first attack came from an unexpected direction. Captain Mingyu had been a cargo ship pilot before the war, hauling supplies between Earth and the lunar colonies. Now his modified freighter was packed with nuclear warheads and accelerating toward the alien fleet at maximum speed. The Kithrans destroyed his ship easily, but the explosions scattered radioactive debris across space, creating a hazard zone that forced them to change course. That single suicide attack was the signal for hundreds of others. Modified cargo ships, mining vessels, even passenger shuttles loaded with explosives began appearing from every direction. The aliens could destroy them all, but each explosion made space a little more dangerous, forced them to waste ammunition, and reminded them that humans refuse to accept defeat. Commander Inai was leading the ground war on Earth itself. When the aliens tried to land troops in major cities, they found that the humans had learned from their orbital battles. Every building was a potential fortress. Every street was a trap. Every civilian was a potential fighter. "They expect us to run and hide," Inai told her resistance cell as they prepared another ambush in the ruins of downtown Tokyo. "Instead, we make them afraid to leave their ships." The urban warfare was brutal and chaotic. Human fighters used homemade explosives, modified vehicles, and improvised weapons against alien soldiers in advanced armor. The Kithrans were better equipped and better trained, but they were fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. A grocery store would explode when alien troops entered it. A subway tunnel would collapse, trapping an entire patrol. Children's toys would be rigged with explosives and left in the street. The humans were turning their own cities into death traps, destroying their own homes to hurt the invaders. The psychological effect on the Kithran soldiers was devastating. They were used to fighting other military forces with clear objectives and rational tactics. They weren't prepared for an enemy that treated the complete destruction of their own civilization as an acceptable price for resistance. Dr. Hana was working 18-hour days in a laboratory that had been moved underground after the third bombing. Her team was reverse engineering every piece of alien technology they could get their hands on. Crashed ships, damaged weapons, even fragments of alien armor were being studied and copied. "Look at this," she said excitedly, pointing to a piece of Kithran equipment that her team had partially figured out. "Their energy shields work on a frequency rotation. If we can match the frequency at exactly the right moment, we can punch through them." The breakthrough led to the development of modified human weapons that could actually damage alien ships. The technology was crude and unreliable, but it worked. For the first time since the war began, human fighters were scoring kills against Kithran vessels. The siege stretched from weeks into months. The aliens controlled most of Earth's major population centers, but they couldn't hold them peacefully. Every day brought new attacks, new ambushes, new reminders that the humans refused to be conquered. Admiral Vextar's casualty reports made for grim reading. The Kithran Empire was losing more soldiers per day fighting these humans than they had lost in their previous 3 wars combined. His medical ships were full of wounded troops suffering from what the doctors were calling combat stress disorder, something that had never been seen before in Kithran military history. "Sir," his communications officer reported during one particularly bad week, "we've received another message from the human leadership." Vextar sighed. "Let me guess, the same word as always." "Actually, no, sir. This time it's 2 words. What do they say?" "Still no." Despite everything they had thrown at Earth, despite controlling most of the planet's surface, despite having overwhelming technological superiority, the humans were still refusing to surrender. They were still fighting, still adapting, still finding new ways to make the occupation costly and dangerous. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Vextar began to wonder if the Kithran Empire had bitten off more than it could chew. Dr. Hana stared at the alien device on her laboratory table, her eyes bloodshot from 3 days without sleep. The Kithran energy core was still humming with power, even though it had been ripped from a crashed ship 2 weeks ago. Around her, teams of engineers and scientists worked frantically, taking apart alien technology piece by piece. "We're thinking about this all wrong," she said suddenly, causing everyone in the lab to stop what they were doing. "We keep trying to copy their technology exactly, but what if we combine it with ours instead?" The breakthrough came when Hana's team connected a Kithran energy cell to a human railgun. The alien power source was 10 times more efficient than anything humans had ever built, but it was designed to work with their weapons. When connected to human kinetic weapons, something unexpected happened. The railgun fired metal slugs with enough force to punch through alien armor that had previously been indestructible. "It's like putting a race car engine in a tank," explained Engineer Wanjay, grinning despite his exhaustion. "It shouldn't work, but somehow it's better than either technology alone." Word of the breakthrough spread quickly through the human resistance networks. Within days, every secret laboratory on Earth was working on the same problem. How do you take alien technology and make it work with human weapons? The results were terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Human missiles equipped with Kithran targeting systems could track alien ships through hyperspace jumps. Conventional explosives enhanced with alien energy cores created blast patterns that could disable ships 20 times their size. Even simple projectile weapons became deadly when powered by technology that was thousands of years more advanced. Captain Wu Jin was one of the first pilots to test the new hybrid fighters. His aircraft looked like a human design from the outside, but the cockpit was filled with alien technology that his engineers had barely figured out how to operate. The energy readings were off the charts, and the performance was incredible. "This thing can pull maneuvers that should liquefy my internal organs," he reported during his first test flight. "But somehow, the alien gravity systems are keeping me conscious." The modified fighters were faster than anything the Kithrans had seen from humans before. More importantly, they were unpredictable. Human pilots flew in ways that alien computer systems couldn't calculate, making sharp turns and impossible maneuvers that defied their understanding of physics. But the real breakthrough came when humans started modifying themselves. Sergeant Bommy had volunteered for the first experimental enhancement program. The procedure involved connecting alien neural interfaces directly to her brain, allowing her to control multiple weapon systems simultaneously. The surgery was dangerous and irreversible, but she didn't hesitate. "I can see everything," she said. After the operation, her eyes now glowing with a faint blue light from the alien implants. Every target, every trajectory, every weak point in their armor. It's like having superhuman senses. The enhanced soldiers were devastating in combat. They could process information at speeds that matched alien computers, but they still fought, with human creativity and unpredictability. Bommy could coordinate the actions of an entire squad just by thinking, turning individual fighters into a perfectly synchronized unit. Dr. Yuna was working on even more ambitious modifications. Her team had discovered that alien genetic enhancement technology could be adapted for human biology. The first volunteers underwent changes that made them stronger, faster, and more resilient than normal humans. "We're not trying to become aliens," she explained to the volunteers waiting for their procedures. "We're trying to become better humans, humans who can fight on their level." Lieutenant Junho was part of the first squad of genetically enhanced soldiers. The modifications allowed him to breathe in alien atmospheres, see in different light spectrums, and survive in the vacuum of space for short periods. His team could infiltrate alien ships without spacesuits, something the Kithrans had never had to defend against. "They build their ships assuming that boarders will need life support," Junho reported after his first successful infiltration mission. "They never considered that humans might modify themselves to survive in their environment." The psychological effect on the Kithran forces was devastating. They were used to fighting enemies who operated within predictable biological limitations. Humans who could survive in space, see through walls, and process information like computers were completely outside their experience. Admiral Vextar reviewed the latest intelligence reports with growing concern. The humans weren't just adapting to alien technology, they were improving it. Their hybrid weapons were more effective than pure Kithran designs. Their modified soldiers were outperforming his own troops in individual combat. "How is this possible?" he demanded from his science officer. "We've had this technology for thousands of years. They've had it for months. Sir, I believe it's because they approach problems differently than we do. We perfect our technology slowly and carefully. They experiment wildly and accept massive risks. Most of their attempts fail, but the ones that succeed exceed anything we thought possible." The most disturbing development was the human volunteers who underwent full cybernetic conversion. These individuals replaced entire body parts with alien technology, becoming more machine than human. They could interface directly with captured alien ships, turning the enemy's own vessels against them. Commander Minji had replaced both arms and most of her nervous system with alien components. She could pilot captured Kithran fighters better than their original crews, using the ship's systems in ways they were never designed for. "I can feel what the ship is thinking," she explained to her human commanders. "The alien AI tries to resist, but human creativity confuses it. We can make their own technology work against them." The breakthrough that changed everything came when Dr. Hana's team figured out how to mass-produce the hybrid technology. Instead of requiring weeks to modify each weapon or vehicle, they developed assembly lines that could upgrade human equipment in hours. Factories across Earth began producing weapons that looked human, but fought like alien technology. Soldiers received implants that enhanced their abilities beyond natural limits. Pilots underwent genetic modifications that let them survive maneuvers that would kill unmodified humans. The Kithran Empire had never faced an enemy that could adapt this quickly. Their military doctrine was based on technological superiority, but the humans were closing that gap at an impossible speed. Worse, they were combining alien technology with human tactics in ways that created entirely new forms of warfare. "They're not trying to become like us," Admiral Vextar realized as he watched video footage of enhanced human soldiers dismantling his troops. "They're trying to become something we can't predict or counter." The final shock came when his intelligence officers reported that humans were voluntarily undergoing modifications that damaged their original biology permanently. They were sacrificing their humanity itself to gain the power to fight more effectively. "Sir," his aide reported nervously, "the humans have just broadcast another message to our fleet." "What does it say this time?" "Come and take it." Admiral Vextar stared at the blue planet below, where millions of humans were transforming themselves into something the galaxy had never seen before. An entire species that was willing to evolve itself for war, to sacrifice everything they had been in order to survive what they were becoming. For the first time since the war began, he wondered if the Kithran Empire was fighting something they couldn't defeat. 18 months after the first alien ships appeared over Earth, Admiral Solar stood on the bridge of what had once been a Kithran battlecruiser. The ship still looked alien from the outside, with its sleek black hull and strange angles, but the inside had been completely transformed. Human engineers had ripped out the original systems and replaced them with hybrid technology that even the ship's original designers wouldn't recognize. "All stations report ready," her communications officer announced. Around Earth's orbit, 43 captured and modified alien vessels waited for the signal to begin humanity's first interstellar offensive. Each ship was crewed by volunteers who had undergone extreme modifications to survive in alien environments. The plan was simple and insane in equal measure. Instead of defending Earth and waiting for the Kithrans to bring more reinforcements, humanity was going to attack their supply lines. They were going to take the war to the aliens' home territory. Captain Minho commanded the lead assault ship, a vessel that had been so heavily modified it was barely recognizable as Kithran technology. His crew of 30 had all volunteered for genetic and cybernetic enhancements that allowed them to operate in the ship's alien atmosphere. Half of them no longer looked entirely human. "Remember," Minho addressed his crew over the ship's communication system, "we're not trying to conquer their empire. We're trying to show them that nowhere is safe as long as they're at war with Earth." The first target was a Kithran supply depot 3 light-years from Earth. The facility was lightly defended because it was deep in alien territory, surrounded by dozens of worlds that had been conquered centuries ago. No enemy had ever penetrated this far into Kithran space. Engineer Jion, whose body was more machine than flesh after her modifications, interfaced directly with the ship's navigation system. "Jump coordinates locked in. All systems show green. We're as ready as we'll ever be." The human fleet disappeared from Earth's orbit in flashes of twisted space-time. The jump technology was stolen from the aliens, but human engineers had modified it to work faster and leave a smaller energy signature. They could attack and disappear before the enemy knew what hit them. The supply depot appeared on their screens, exactly where intelligence had predicted. It was a massive structure, larger than any human city, floating in space surrounded by cargo ships and defensive platforms. Thousands of Kithran workers and soldiers went about their daily routines, completely unaware that death was approaching from hyperspace. "All ships, this is Admiral Solar. Begin the attack." The human fleet opened fire with weapons that should not have existed. Hybrid cannons that combined alien energy systems with human projectile technology tore through defensive shields that had been designed to stop conventional Kithran weapons. The supply depot's defenders found themselves facing firepower they couldn't understand or counter. Commander Johan led the boarding parties that infiltrated the station. His team moved through the alien corridors like ghosts, their modified bodies adapted to the station's atmosphere and gravity. They planted explosives with precision, targeting critical systems that would cripple the facility even after the human fleet departed. "This is for Earth," Johan whispered as he armed the final charges. The explosion would destroy enough supplies to delay the Kithran offensive by weeks, maybe months. But the real impact wasn't the physical damage. It was the psychological shock that rippled through the Kithran Empire when news of the attack spread. For the first time in their history, a primitive species had struck at the heart of their territory. The species they were trying to conquer had somehow become the aggressor,